In today's episode, I talk with one of my favorite humans on this planet, Emily Sauer, who is a friend of mine, and she's also the CEO and founder of the Pelvic People. And she and I just always have such a fun time talking because I think we're both really curious, and yet we bring kind of different energies to the conversation. And I know that today's episode is a little bit different because we've recorded it as opposed to when we normally hang out and just go on walks and talk. But I'm excited to give you a glimpse of it because I think it's going to be clear just listening to Emily about why she has found success in what she's done. She's such a sweet, charismatic, funny, endearing person that I feel like anyone who meets her just wants to be in her midst. And that is like a real skill that I think we don't always talk about. It's not even a skill, but it's just a way of being. It's like it's an asset, is like being a really awesome, likable person. And everyone can have a different flavor of that. But I think Emily's is so magnetic in her childlike curiosity and her ability to play. And she uses these powers for good. In our conversation today, we will talk about how she had some tough things happen to her in life. In our conversation, we'll talk about how some of setbacks in her life actually led to a lot of her purpose, from struggling with ADHD as a child and kind of having to figure out creative problem solving ways to get by in school and eventually make it into quite a good university, to experiencing painful sex and turning that into the company that she now runs with a small team and is just kind of ever expanding. So she is someone who I think reminds us in her story of how you can take a really low moment in life and actually come rise from the ashes and make lemonade with it, right? So I hope you can listen in if you're looking to be inspired about how to take some of the pain points or even low moments in your life and do something good with them. All right. Well, I'm excited for today because I realize that some of our recent conversations have been more about our personal life and the journey to becoming moms, um, and today's going to be a bit more professional leaning. So,
Eh.
and even when I was, yeah, when I was looking, I hope it can be. Was checking out your profile ahead of time, and I was thinking about how it's interesting when you have good friends that you've met later in life. You know, at this point, you and I have known each other for since 2018. So that's kind of wild. 7 years have just gone by, and I didn't even know that you went to Cornell. So I was like looking it back, and I was like, oh, these fun things I can learn about Emily's past.
What does
Um,
that say about me as a person? How do you think about me differently now?
well, I think, um, yeah, like it's kind of that idea of like sometimes when we're younger, I think people have put people in boxes a little bit faster, maybe like because of accolades and associations, because your world is just like smaller as like a young
Or everyone's
emerging
moving in
adult.
that direction, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So there's a point of comparison, but
Yeah.
then people's paths all kind of go wonky and in various directions. And so it's not always as interesting to go back that far. But I guess on that note, like how far back would you go in terms of like telling a few key turning points that have gotten you to where you are?
Yeah.
And maybe actually for the people listening, where is where is you now?
Where am I in the world? I'm in
Yes.
New York, just north of New York City,
Yeah.
looking out to nature right now, which is not New York
Mm.
City for sure. But yeah, I always introduce myself. I'm Emily. I'm the CEO and founder of the Pelvic People, and it's
Woohoo.
been a journey to get here. I will say, I never expected to be where I am right now, although I'm not surprised. My company creates tools for the 119 million women and people with vulvas who have painful sex, who will have painful sex today, which is a tagline I never thought I would say.
Hmm.
But truthfully, I ended up where I am because of this really beautiful constellation of like tribulations and triumphs in my life. And I think where it starts is me being like a total ADHD kid, like
Mm.
school. You mentioned Cornell University. I'm like, okay, cool, but I like wasn't a Cornell kid. Like I wasn't the smart kid in school. I had what's it called, an IEP. I had like I was classified as having a learning disability.
Mm,
Um, so I had severe test anxiety and I had a really hard time concentrating. Um, and I would say that because I didn't learn the same way that everyone else did, I had to solve problems differently. I had to figure
mm.
out, because I still had that like intense drive to succeed, but I couldn't get there on the same road that everyone else did. So I was like, all right, where are these side doors? Like, how can I wiggle my way into weird spaces? So, you know, I I was like I majored in art at Cornell University,
I
and
didn't
I
know
was on
that.
the
That's so
crew
cool.
team for a little while.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was the coxswain. I just like barked at people really early in the morning, um,
Hmm.
which is also very fitting for my character. But
Well, can I pause for a second and
yeah,
like think to hear this, real story of feeling like, okay, I had to solve problems differently, but
yeah.
still winding up, getting admitted to a coveted, Ivy League school. How do you explain that? Like, how did you figure out to solve problems academically in this very structured, rigid system?
It's not so structured. It's funny.
Mm.
I was
Mm.
raised, both my parents are entrepreneurial, and my dad raised me under this like philosophy that everything is negotiable. And so I was just like, all right, if all these things, if I have this IEP, I have extended time. All right, I'm going to use that extended time and I'm going
Mm.
to like, you know, like I have a real social aspect of my life where I'm really able to connect with people quickly and rally them into things and get people excited. And I will say that is like probably my like number one superpower, which I have definitely used. Not like I'm not like an opportunist in that way because it's all coming from a genuine place, but things tend to work out when you really like believe in the people who you're surrounded by, and then they believe in you. And then everyone wants to help everyone out, and then everybody wins. So I just kind of figured out how to get on
Mm.
those trains throughout the whole
Mm.
process.
I know it's not as simple as this, but it almost, the way I'm interpreting what you said is like, the school system wasn't as rigid, and you, through relationship building
Yeah,
and conversation and sort of informal negotiations, found your way to success there.
totally.
Mhm.
Totally. I think when you present yourself as human, I remember actually like I slept through a final during college and I just like went to the professor and talked to them and was like, I'm so sorry. And then they let me retake it. I think it's also, there's an audacity, I think, that comes with being a CEO and entrepreneur that you have to, the thing that you're afraid of asking for is the thing that you should ask for. Or like, it's stepping out into fear and out of that comfort zone because you never know when you get yes as the answer. And if you get no, then it means you're on the right path. You're like, not like that you're on the right path, but that you're stepping into a boundary, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
Uh,
Did you, I mean, hearing that both your parents were entrepreneurial, it kind of sounds like it's like baked into your upbringing or your DNA, or
I didn't like
like,
project it. I was
but
like, I
at
just
what
don't want to
point?
work for anyone else. I just want to work for
And
myself. Again, because like I didn't fit into a 9 to 5. I was like, I can't
right.
sit for that long. How in the world am I going to find a job? And bless my parents for letting me major in painting. My God. But you figure you
Hmm.
can use an art degree, you can use a visual training for lots of things.
Yes. I think that's, the when I looked at your LinkedIn as a place of like, where do people log the
Stuff.
professional histories that they've
Yeah.
had, right? It did strike me that I'm like, oh, there's a lot of self-employment. And it sounds like you kind of gathered that early on.
Well, a big part of self-employment is having people who believe in you.
Mm.
It's not just jumping off a cliff and hoping for the best. It's
Mm.
casting an idea out into the world and having someone almost believe in what you're bringing into the world more than you believe in it yourself. And they're older and wiser and more experienced than you are, and they can take your hand
Mm.
and guide you into the future so that you're not jumping off of a cliff at all. In fact, you're walking on a very clear path. And that path is still yet to be determined specifically. But
Mm.
uh, I went to Cornell. I ended up getting a job in photography as a digital technician is the official name of it. But I was basically on the computer on these high profile photo shoots, managing all the hardware and software and egos. I was just like the base station for like I was on like two photo shoots with Trump. Not that that's anything to brag about, but like Beyonce, Jennifer Lopez, all the actors, all the beautifully shaped people in Victoria's Secret, like all these people who can look at a computer screen and doubt all the decisions that they made in their lives. And I was responsible for making them feel good about themselves in
That sounds
part.
like a big jump from like, as that was your first main
Job.
job after college.
Uh-huh.
After, yeah. Wow.
So I
Did
got
you
hired.
feel a lot of pressure?
It was a personality hire because they
Mm-hmm.
liked how I interacted with people. So I switched from painting to photo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I got hired by the biggest digital tech company in New York City at the time. And it's funny because I applied for multiple jobs and I didn't get the job that I really wanted and I instead got this one. And this job literally set me up for my entire professional existence.
Mm.
Because I got hired, I worked for this company, I made crazy relationships with very established photographers. And then ultimately, they wanted to continue working with me. And so I left the company and kept the photographers. There
Mm.
wasn't any non compete.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, what I did there is because it was essentially a service job. I would go on photo shoots and I would work on the computer gear. I would bring the cameras, I would bring the computers, and then I would do the thing on photo shoot. But when I left that job, the photographer who took me on most of the time encouraged me to buy my own gear.
Mm.
So I bought all my own equipment, and then so I was not only providing the service, I was renting the gear out. So I
Mm-hmm.
was making a substantial amount. I was making 4 times the service rate by renting gear. And
Wow.
then I did that for 10 years. And so essentially what that did was set me up financially to start the Pelvic People afterwards.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. So I love this reframe of like, yeah, it's not you jumping off a cliff. It's like having other people believe in you and even, having this moment of maybe advice or mentorship of like someone encouraging you to buy the gear. And that led to, this income source that seemed influential.
Yeah, it's almost like beyond mentorship. It's like they're an ambassador. They're more hands on than mentoring because she was my employer in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing actually happened with the Pelvic People, and we can get into this more specifically. But as soon as I started talking about the things that I was working on, oh my God, it was just like people wanted to help.
Mm.
All of a sudden, doctors wanted to help. Everyone that I spoke to just wanted to like take action. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really when you know that you're onto something. When you've got like your your nails. I don't know what the analogy is that I'm when there's like a grip on something tangible.
Yes, yes. Well, I know I'm much more familiar with the fact that of your story from starting ONET, now the Pelvic People. But if we think back to that first business of yours,
Yeah.
did you feel that passion for what you were doing to the point where you were like inspiring and enlisting everyone around you?
Yeah, I did. I think, oh man. So the job itself, I was on these photo shoots and so the job was technical. Technically it was a computer job. I am not a computer person. I'm actually really good at keyboard shortcuts, which gives the impression that I'm really technical. Because you could just look like you're really fast at stuff. And then you come with a sense of confidence and people believe it. But, and I was I was very good at my job, but I wasn't the most technically proficient person. But
Mhm.
I really enjoyed I felt really good at my job and people wanted to work with me. It was this positive reinforcement cycle. And
Mm,
it wasn't impact oriented. So I wasn't like shouting from the rooftops, like, I'm making a difference. Because I was literally just working on photo shoots to sell things to people, which is actually a bit, in part why I left. I
mhm,
didn't feel, it felt a little bit soulless towards the end.
mm,
But I think it was just such a great character and skill set fit for me that
mm,
the job itself was going really well. I was overbooked constantly. And in fact I was in a position to expand my company, so it wasn't just me. I could buy more gear, I could hire more people. But as this like ADD kid who didn't know how to run a business, I was like, I know how to run a one-man show, a one-person show. Um, and I didn't expand. I was like, I'm making good money. I don't need to make this more
mm,
stressful than it already is. And so I think that was actually a really powerful moment for me too, is that like I want to work hard and also not work too hard in a way
mhm.
that takes away from my like quality of life.
Yes. I want to hear a little more about when you look back at how it was such a good fit. I'm hearing that it was really, you were doing well, you were in demand, it made you feel good, like it was like edifying that you were providing a service that people really valued. And then I guess more in like the day to day, the like imagine you running off to shoots, like it's very, you know, even though there's this technical aspect, I also maybe picture you interfacing with people a lot and it being kind of in the IRL world. Is that true?
Oh yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's all
Okay.
social. You become
Right.
family with these teams because
Mm,
you're traveling with them, you're spending long days with them, you're like waiting with them. People are getting upset. There's just a lot of ups and downs within the same like, repetitive groups of people, and yeah, there's a lot of I actually do very much miss the in person stuff, but at the
mhm,
same time, what was hard about it is that because it was so time intensive, so unpredictable, that I couldn't plan my life. Like I couldn't plan vacations. I would constantly miss birthday parties. I remember like in my early 20s, two of my friends, it was a group of friends, and two of my friends made out, and I was like, oh my God, I missed it. I missed when two of my friends, that was like what really tipped it over for me. I was like, I can't do this forever. Uh,
that was the tipping point.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm hearing it's like very bonding, kind of immersive, being
yeah.
um, physically, with people. You didn't have your team, your employees, but you were working essentially on these sort of transitory teams all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, but I mean, when you travel with a team
Yeah,
for a week, you get
you get
tight
to
real
know them.
fast. Yeah.
I think you've given a lot of great voice to your relational gifts and that side that really worked. I want to hear a little bit more about the being drawn to art, photography, the visual sensibilities that you had to have in order to do well at that job, and I'm sure that has carried over to what you do now.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of, I mean, I studied a studio art in college, and so you're just, and in fact, I did photorealistic painting, which was actually miserable because you're beholden to reality. Oh my God, in painting. And so I actually got used to such negative critiques, and I tend to be a really positive person. And not that like I just some people are kind of obnoxious in the art critique space. Not that anyways, whatever. Uh, so I've always found myself in very like cheerleading positions. So
Mm,
the combination of it was a combination of having a visual sensibility, but also being encouraging at the same time. It's like if you
mm,
see a beautiful picture show up on the screen and then in the middle of the photo shoot, I'm like, it looks amazing. Like the hair looks, because I'm in touch with the hair people and the makeup people and I know what the photographer wants. And I know what the client wants. And then I'm the person that says like, it's working, and then everyone feels this burst of like, it's working. And then that changes the whole trajectory of the photo shoot. And so,
mm,
so the visual training really
mm,
helped me see the story that people wanted to create
mm,
through imagery.
mhm,
How it needed to align with certain brand stories. I would get brand books all the time. I would get like ad concepts that needed to meet certain criteria. And then I was a big part of helping the communication process to get there. Yeah.
That's really fascinating to kind of almost hear you bring it back to like it is about visually uh, being able to spot and discern like when something is working. But maybe what I pick up from what you shared is like you also had to be really good at listening and understanding what all these different stakeholders wanted in order to have those kind of it's working exciting moments, and then
Yeah.
being able to like not just communicate them but communicate them in a way that garnered more excitement.
Yeah, and then that they're received. Yeah, I mean, there were times when I was on a photo shoot with Oscar de la Renta, and they were like, "Do not talk to him, no matter what you do." And meanwhile, I had taken like an art history course, and I learned about all these different types of stones in Rome. And there's one stone called porphyry. It's this purple stone that's mined in Egypt, and there isn't any left. And he had these two porphyry columns, and I was just like, I love your porphyry columns. And he was like, I know. Anyway, so it's just like knowing where to push. And I was on a photo shoot with Patti LaBelle, and she just had a total meltdown for like 6 hours. And so the whole photo crew, we had like a dance moment, and she came out and saw us dancing, and she told me that I was like sunshine. I don't know. It was just like, there were just some really beautiful moments of connection where people need uplifting. And that's really where I came in. I don't know. I felt at home there, and not useful. That sounds so utilitarian, but
Yeah.
I forget what your question was. Sorry, I just went on a total tangent.
No, I love hearing these stories, and I think the audacity comes back to mind where it's like, yeah, you were told don't talk to this famous person, and you couldn't help yourself. Your excitement is so contagious and like I think endearing, and like I'm glad to hear that these big shots in a way were still kind of they still need that connection. They still need uplifting. We all do.
Yeah, it's true. And not letting a facade get in the way of that,
So then tell me, you decided there was this kind of almost moment where you could have expanded, and you concertedly, intentionally decided like, no, I got to be there to see my friends make out and like have a work-life balance, or I don't know, something was telling you like that wasn't the direction.
Yeah, it really wasn't. God, it's so hard to say this out loud, but I'm really not a great email person. I used to drag my feet on sending invoices sometimes. There are just like administrative stuff that was not easy for me when it was really hard to sit down and put some of these organizational things together. And I knew that expanding the business would require more administration from me and more just like remote monitoring. And I don't want to be in these social situations. I don't want to be on my phone more. I don't want to be in my email more. I want to be present, and I want to be contributing in the way that I'm brought there to do. And so it was a really empowering decision it was a very clear choice. I knew the answer was not to expand.
Yeah, that's so great that you listened to that and kind of you helped yourself out like by being accepting it and acknowledging like, hey, this is a skill set that I don't particularly enjoy or thrive at.
Yeah.
So like, why I don't want to dial that up. That is unwise.
Yeah, very unwise. Yeah, and then the things that I could learn. I mean, I could do it. Obviously, I could do it. I could learn how to do it, but I didn't want that stress.
Right. And so what happened? How did the next chapter get ushered in?
Yeah. When you do things, for me, I think I have like 10-year thresholds for things. And so I started working on the digital like technology stuff for photo shoots as we were transitioning from film to digital. And so people had no idea what this camera gear was, what the computer gear was, how people didn't know any of it. And so I came with a very unique skill set. Meanwhile, over the course of 10 years, computer gear got cheaper, camera gear got cheaper. The photographers started buying their own gear. And so that kind of wave of success was naturally tapering a little bit.
Mm.
And it just happened to coincide with a really bad relationship. There were a couple of life trajectories that were on just like a slow path down, and they all
Mhm.
met at the bottom at one point. And what was interesting about that is I was in this really unhealthy relationship with a lovely person. I'll say that. And for me, sex was painful. Sex had always been painful, but the fact that I was in this very stressful relationship was actually way worse. And every time I had sex and I was physically, that like jolt of pain was just not just a physical reminder that I was in pain, it was that I wasn't the person I wanted to be. I wasn't the partner I wanted to be. I wasn't confident. I wasn't anything. You kind of can feel as we talk how I know my strengths and my powers, and when they're there and they're alive. And at this point in my life, I felt none of it,
Mm.
absolutely none of it. And for so long, I had done nothing about the experience of pain during sex. I didn't talk to any of my partners about it. I brought it up to a doctor every
Mm.
year that I went up to my OBGYN, and every year it was dismissed because nothing shows up on a sonogram, nothing shows up on tests, and so I must be fine. And I figured if everything points to nothing, then I'm the person to blame. I had no one to blame but myself. So finally, at this really low point in my life, I came up with a ridiculous idea of, of you know, of just putting a donut around a penis, frankly. If I could just control how deep penetration went, because deep penetration was what was painful for me, then maybe I wouldn't hate myself so much, frankly.
Mm.
Uh, and it's really interesting. I don't know if can we talk about parent stuff? We were talking
Mm.
about Montessori, and Montessori doesn't like fantastical play.
Mm.
They're very, teach your kid to play in realistic situations. The word play is not acceptable. Meanwhile, this idea of putting a donut around a penis is absolutely bonkers. It's a crazy idea. And meanwhile, what
Mm.
I found out is that while I had felt very alone in my experience of pain during sex and I felt very unrelatable, the second that I started talking about it is I couldn't believe how alone I wasn't.
Mm.
Uh,
Mhm.
it became this driving force in my life. I was talking to literally like everyone and anyone about pain during sex when I came up with this crazy idea because I tried out a prototype at home and it worked. And at
Mhm.
that point, the light bulb just went off, and
Mm.
I got in touch with like friends of the family doctors. I would just talk to anyone, and the
I want to
feedback. Yeah,
jump in here because what I didn't realize about your experience is that um, you didn't talk to your partners before this. I guess I
no,
thought, knowing again that like boldness that you have to go up to Oscar de la Renta and talk to him about the
four free
columns,
columns.
right? Or yeah, like I think that just goes to show how unique sex is in
Yeah.
terms of a category where shame and like not wanting to talk about things show up. And yeah, I guess that surprised me to hear, but it sounds like the excitement around a solution
Oh, it overshadowed all of that
unlocked.
doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about not speaking up during sex, and which is extremely common, is that partners actually want to know. We so often feel ashamed of what we might be broken or what societal expectations we're not meeting in that moment of intimacy when we're so incredibly vulnerable, or even outside of that moment when our bodies don't align with how we see ourselves. Uh, yeah, um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, speaking up to a partner is incredibly hard, and they
Mm.
do in fact want to know most often and help out. So it's
That sounds
really
like a very, yeah, an important fact
yeah,
that would, if you really truly believe that,
yeah.
that can shift your openness to sharing about it. When you were starting to go around and talk about your donut idea, were you still in this unhealthy relationship or had you broken it off at that point?
Yes, we were still in the relationship.
Mm.
You know, it took a while to, it's really easy to just I mean, I think also the reason why I didn't do anything about the pain during sex for so long, and why it's so much easier to stick with the discomforts that we know as opposed to taking a step into the unknown.
Mm.
And that was for the relationship that I was in. It was easier to actually stay in a shitty relationship than step out of it. But it was finally that there was so much positivity happening with Onut at that time that it became very clear that it was the relationship that was holding me back in lots of ways.
Yeah. I like hearing about how these kind of, personal, romantic, even spheres and professional, like they can be separate in our mind and even how we spend our times, but they're connected, right? Like your story, especially, there has this interplay between the
Yeah.
two.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that's interesting about where that relationship ended, like the ways in which it failed, I was trying so desperately during our relationship. That was when I read Driven to Distraction, which is a wonderful book about ADHD. And it was the first time I actually realized that I wasn't alone in my experience of having ADHD symptoms. And I finally got counseling for it because I was put on medication, but never given appropriate counseling for executive functioning deficits, I
Mm.
will say. So as I was doing all this trial and error to figure out how to work with my ADD tendencies, he just kept putting me down.
Mm.
He kept putting me down when they didn't work. Like, why am I still trying? Like, you should be doing it this way, and
Mm.
so I had this aspect of this repressed, or just, I don't know what the word would be, but the part of my life started to thrive. It had nothing to do with my ADD. It's like you take the spotlight off of the thing that's not working and just follow the momentum, and
Mm.
and ADD kind of, it's still there, but it doesn't take as much of that forefront focus because there's a
Mhm.
propulsion from underneath that gets everything going.
Yeah. I've, noticed in my circles and, especially working with creatives that I think more and more people are getting um, wise to their own kind of neurodivergent diagnoses and finding counseling or finding, medication or really just like, I think, support in hearing about other people's stories. And it strikes me that your work with the pelvic people is also destigmatizing
Mhm.
something. Um, and you could have, I don't know, maybe felt so much pain around the ADHD that you kind of, your problem and solution set that led to your business was in that domain, but it wasn't. It was here with painful sex.
Yeah.
I was thinking ahead of our call, I was like curious. I'm like, what if Emily had like, I don't know, like a real, like a problem with her foot or something? Like,
It's
like,
ADD. Yeah.
well, like, I guess inherent in my question is there something uniquely attractive, fitting for sex, for intimacy, for someone who's so relationship focused that it's had extra pull than it would have if it was any kind of other medical, it's a hypothetical, but
Yeah,
I'm curious
no,
to hear
no,
your
no. I
thoughts.
mean, but I think it's not that distant from ADHD because, like,
Mm.
I had felt so unrelatable in my experiences that I was having, where I like couldn't meet the societal expectations of being on time or finishing a thing, or just very obvious things that some like an alpha person would expect from me. And reading this Driven to Distraction book, the whole first half is anecdotal. It's stories of people who are so ashamed of who they are, and seeing myself in those tribulations was the validation exploded my world. And
Mm.
so a huge part of how I actually, this is kind of blowing my mind right now, that directly translated into the pelvic people subconsciously, because clearly I haven't thought about it really until now. But I wasn't selling. Basically, ONUT is a series of stretchy rings that are worn around the base of a penetrating partner. They're kind of like the Fisher Price donut stacking toys, but way more beautiful and sophisticated. And it's a mechanical adjustment so that a penetrating partner doesn't go in as deep. It's a very simple adjustment to a very complicated problem. And
Mm.
uh, sex is not dissimilar. People feel completely isolated in
Mhm.
their physical experience, being dismissed by doctors, not wanting to talk to partners, not wanting to talk to friends or family, nobody. There's this distinct isolation that happens. And yet, sex and ADHD, there's an abundance of creativity and human
Mhm.
connection and relatability at its core. And I
Mhm.
believe that I can get people to see that.
Mhm. Mhm.
I the you know when I'm afraid to talk about pain during sex and I don't want to talk about it, I'm just like a small shriveled raisin. But if I'm excited to talk about pain during sex, people respond with that same excitement. They're like, oh
Mhm.
my God, I have this too. Or I know someone who has this. Or there's this doctor you should talk to. We're like, ah, there's an energy
Mhm.
behind it um,
Mhm.
that I think, yeah, that sex does very much fit into the same category as ADD, ADHD in that way.
Yeah, I see the connection for sure. And I want to almost like emphasize one aspect of it, which is like, and with ADHD, it's almost like can feel pressure to have your brain, I don't know, do things like answer email after email or care, just like have it operate in a certain way. And I wonder if the parallel with sex sometimes it isn't even just like to have the sex without pain, but so many depictions that we see in society is just like, no, you need to be enjoying it. You need to like be overcome with pleasure. And that's kind of this next level um, pressure, I think. And I was reading an interview that you gave, and there was this quote that I really liked from it, which was, um, at the pelvic people, we recognize the importance of pleasure. That if you start with pleasure without establishing a foundation of safety
Mhm.
or understanding of communication, then pleasure is forced.
Yeah.
So I think when I read that, I was thinking so much about just like human relationships in general, right? Like how do you how do you establish that safety? And I think I want to double click on this because my hunch is that your ability to disarm people or invite them in to be feel safe enough to have these conversations. There's something about your unique gifts that facilitates that in a way that most other people wouldn't have been able to be that catalyst. So like what is that je ne sais quoi, the
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with validation. I think people the confrontation, it's like if someone sees like an ad or something that's like, do you have painful sex? Try this thing that does this thing. It's like, oh my God, get out of here. That's not me. After talking to like thousands of people over the years at this point, when I talk about pain during sex, a lot of people, their knee jerk reaction is like, oh, that's not me. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, you ever feel like that burning at the entrance sometimes? They're like, yeah, totally. It's like, well, that's kind of what we're talking about here.
mm,
There's this like unconscious denial that people
mm,
default to, and there has to again, what's that side door? And the
yes,
side door
yes.
isn't trying to sell someone something. It's really getting into the core of,
Mm,
I when I first started developing Own It, I made so many phone calls to people, be like, what is your experience? How does it make you feel? Like underneath all of it, what do you hope for?
mhm,
At the end of the day,
mhm,
people just want to know that they're not crazy. They want
mhm,
they want to feel connected to their partner. So starting from there, the company starts from there, and we come at it not from like a sad place or a broken place. It's coming from a place of hope.
mhm, mhm.
I think
Yes.
validation and hope, but not in the hope that's just like use this thing and it's going to work. It's like no, being realistic about believe helping people believe Mr. Rogers is just like one of my greatest heroes, but helping people believe that they're capable exactly the way that they already are.
Mm, mhm,
It takes people a really long way, giving people a sense of hope and belief in themselves as they are.
mm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think your example though you gave is really illustrative, where it's like, okay, if you ask people like, are you having painful sex, they'll kind of shut down and say, no,
No.
no, no, that's not me, right? But you're, um, at least with that example, it's like a gift around messaging, the side door of like communicating in language that sort of disarms or doesn't attach to sort of like um, preconceived notions or stigmas that people might, have inherited from our society. Um, I've always think of you as such a gifted storyteller, and what's so cool about you is that you understand how to connect to people empathetically and energetically, and that happens at the nonverbal level. Like, I think like your animated way and the verbal level, and then you have this whole other skill set around visual storytelling that kind of like, I don't know, it just feels like it's like the whole package.
Yeah, I will say, kind of getting into that, when in those early stages, when you do talk to that many people and that many experts in the field, there's a language learning curve. I very much became this like my experience of painful sex became this universal experience of painful sex. So when I talked about my experience publicly, which was actually a very big strategy point, is like, we didn't come out with this brand. I came out as a person,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and talked about my experience, and then the brand and the product came with that. So, the story is what led the whole initiative when we launched on Kickstarter. But I
mm-hmm.
will say that in talking to so many professionals, my language, I I now sound like a pelvic PT. I talk to pelvic PTs and they ask me often if I am one, and I'm not. But because I
Right.
talk to them so often, I understand it to such a degree that it
But my hunch is that you can code switch though, right? You're not talking to your general customer but you can dial up that the jargon and the language to kind of build that specificity or trust.
yeah,
Um, but you've had to work with different like stakeholder parties and learn the language of multiple groups.
learn the language, but also, I will say, I again, on the audacity train, because I was not only creating a brand that was patient founded, it was critical to me that it be clinically validated, that it resonate with clinicians, that it be something that's trustworthy for them. So I found the medical conference that had the relevant physicians that I wanted to speak to. There were about 300 people there. You can just buy a ticket to a medical conference. You don't have to have any qualifications. And I brought my original prototypes. They're beautiful, but I made them in my kitchen. But I had them. I like had casts made, and then I put the silicone in myself. But
Mm.
I made a point of identifying the top 5 people at the conference that I wanted to talk to. And when I got there, they all knew exactly who I was by the time that weekend was over.
Wow,
Yeah. So
that's bold.
yeah.
That's bold.
And also, it's funny because when you go to a conference with doctors, they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm a patient." All of a sudden, they put on their doctor hat and they're like, "Oh, why are you here? What's wrong?" And then I show them this thing, and they're like, "Oh my god, it makes so much sense." So again, it was talking to the people at the top, getting that positive reinforcement loop, and then getting the stakeholders involved early on to help push it without
Mm.
me even having to. There was a time when I was at another medical conference, and I was in a small breakout session about pain during sex, and they're like, "Does anyone have any?" One of the example patients was like, "Does anyone have any?" Uh, Sorry, an example patient was someone who had deep dyspareunia, and they were looking for at-home solutions that were non-invasive, non-hormonal. And I wanted to like raise my hand and speak up and talk about what I was working on, but I didn't because I was so nervous. And then this PhD student started talking about her research, and I just deflated in that moment because I had
Mm.
missed this opportunity to talk to these specialized physicians. And about a minute after the PhD student was done, this woman in the front row raised her hand and she was like, "Oh, well, there's a new product called Onut that's coming out, in Q4 of this year." And it happened to be one of the women who I had networked with early on. So, like,
Wow.
there's just this, you never know who can help.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, And if you have something worthwhile and people are on board with it, keep talking to more people. Like,
Yes. Yes. Well, your company seems so, I don't know, you're walking, I know we're glossing over so many different like chapters of growing it. But you've been someone that I've uh, valued as a thought partner as I kind of sometimes have come, hey, Emily, like, what do you think about this new, service idea or product? And I think you always beat the helpful drum of like, what problem is this solving, right? And who is this really for? And your story, is so, it's like, I don't know, my mind goes to saying it's like a classic entrepreneurial origin story. It's like, I had this problem, I didn't see anything out there for me, and so I created it. um, I guess maybe a tough question, but like, what if you do find people who are trying to create something that they didn't experience the problem themselves, or they don't, know it quite as like foundationally, intimately as you?
then find someone who does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can also chameleon, but I think it's a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're like really committed to understanding the problem and really saturating, um, I
Mm-hmm.
think that could suffice as well. But for me, also, just in my personality style, my passion comes from when I really like, how do you get to a place where you believe in it so blindly that you're
Mm-hmm.
willing to take an immense risk and start a company around it? But I will say though that uh, jumping on the pelvic people never felt like jumping off a cliff for me. This was another very kind of obvious step by step
Mm-hmm.
situation because it all just kind of made sense throughout the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it's not where my mind goes is just hearing about how this idea was born at a time where you were like at a rock bottom moment, right? And just thinking about sometimes how, pain is not always the prerequisite, but is it's like sometimes when we can focus on where are our pain points, that's usually a place that's ripe for solutions, for solving, for healing, some some sort of improvement.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, and then you find the communities that are adjacent or similar. Get in touch with the people who are starting companies there, figuring out what they're doing. I remember
mm,
when I first started, like sex tech, the word sex tech and femtech had literally just materialized.
mhm,
And the other thing I will say about identifying
mm,
pain point and then kind of roadblocks in the way, uh, because the company is creating products that are used during sex, we can't advertise. And so I know a lot of people start companies and they're like, cool, I'm going to just jump to advertising. I'm just going to drop money into this advertising slot machine and see how it goes. Because we
mm,
couldn't do that, we
mhm,
had to grow organically for the first 5 years.
mm.
And so again, it was literally a matter of getting organic buy-in, organic word of mouth. It was organic press coming in.
Mhm,
Again,
mhm.
so it's just when you really land on that nugget of an unmet need that
Yeah.
perpetuates it, that really has momentum to it, then now that we have this foundation of organic growth, basically we built our clinician network to between 8 and 9,000 clinicians now in the United States who are essentially our sales force.
Mhm, mhm.
Uh, and they do it on their own volition. We don't pay them. We don't even, I mean, we reach out to them as much as we
Mm.
can, but there's just so much we can do. And
Yeah,
so,
they're your ambassadors of sorts.
yeah, yeah, by having kind of by not being able to advertise early on, we had to be really creative about building organically in the beginning.
Yes, yes. Very top of mind. I was just in a call today with some of my incubator members, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't. Instagram isn't working any the same way. Like, what do we do? How do we, if we can't like lean into these, you know, platforms? How do we grow organically?" So um, it seems like one message I'm taking is like when you solve a problem that is so unmet and yet has such like you have real numbers, right? What did you say? 119 million people who are,
Who will have painful sex today?
yeah, yeah. Like
75%
that's
of women will have painful sex in their lifetime. That's like, and honestly, it's
right,
probably higher because not enough people talk about it or even like report it
right,
on the test
right.
that they give you in the clinician office.
So it's like you found an unmet need in what felt like a niche, but when you really look at the numbers, it's like there's a lot of people to choose lives to
It's
touch.
we just had my son's third birthday, and the in-laws were like, "Oh, how's work going? Are you working on it full time or is it part time?" And I was like, "No, it's really full time. Like, I have a team of 10. Like, but
Right,
it's really
right.
interesting because
Mm,
there is this, because it's such a stigmatized topic. People think it's a very small problem because
mm-hmm,
there's just this gross misunderstanding around pelvic health and pain during sex. And that's fine with me. I will take a gigantic niche any day.
mm-hmm,
You know,
mm-hmm.
I think
Yes.
we overlook so many areas because they're deemed too small. But then you have these raving fans that are absolutely the most ravey fans on the planet. Because the first
Mm-hmm.
time that someone has sex and they're not in pain, you want to tell everyone in your whole world about it.
Yes.
And it just goes.
Hmm. To that point, right? Um, you're not part time. You're full time. You're
Yeah.
running. You have a team.
Yes.
What could you give a snapshot of like what you're working on now with the team, and maybe even a little bit about like what your team looks like?
Sure. We actually just started to be able to advertise. So our first product is Onut, which is for deep pain during sex. The second product is called Kiwi. It's for entry pain, and it takes just real quick. Entry pain is the pain around the entrance of the vagina before, after, or during sex, and it can be physiological in origin and also reinforced by fear, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the solution options right now are extremely phallic, and we created one that isn't. There are two options available on the market, and we created a third one that is not phallic. It's really not intimidating, and in fact feels good to use. So we're not only addressing the underlying physiological complications, but also creating an intrinsic motivation to use it and keep using it. Because I could go on like a whole riff about that thing, but anyways, tools are only helpful if
Mm-hmm.
you want to use them. And so we created a tool that clinicians want to refer and that people want to use.
Mm-hmm.
So because it doesn't look phallic and it doesn't look like a sex toy, we can advertise. And because it's not used during sex, we can say it helps with pelvic relaxation, muscle relaxation, reduces fear. There's no,
Mm,
it's not offensive to people who are potentially seeing that. You either get it, you really get it, and if you don't get it, you're not bothered by it.
right,
So
right.
we're really focusing on kind of pulling those levers now that we can. So we're
Mm-hmm.
focusing on building our clinician initiative and then advertising.
This is kind of linking to some other conversations you and I've had around like having your first child that you love so much, and then kind of can you even fathom that you'll love a second child as much? And I can't help but see these two products of like, wow, you birthed these two, you know, tools, these new creations, and I guess, well, maybe to detach a little bit from the child parenting metaphor, but like, have you seen how do you hold Ona and Kiwi at the same time? Or
What's
mm-hmm,
funny is that, like, after you come up with Onut, you're like, I don't know if I can birth a second child. And so back in 2017, when I was in the Facebook group of the sex tech founders, there were 40 of us in there, and there were two of us talking about pain during sex. Everyone was talking about orgasms and the pleasure gap and pleasure equity, and two of us were talking about pain. That second person is our product designer now.
mm,
She lives in the Netherlands. We've kept in touch. We've been friends for years. We had kids at the same time,
mm,
and she is now our head of research and development. And I will say, full transparently, like, she conceptualized Kiwi
mm-hmm,
because you can't. There's just so much that an individual can do. The company is the team, and
mm-hmm.
I'm very proud of the team that we have together. And if you want to talk about it, there's just like a few little little techniques that keep our team feeling connected because we're all fully remote.
Mm-hmm.
We've been remote
How
since
big is the
2019.
team? How many people?
We're 3 full time, but we're 10. On our biweekly all hands, we have 10.
Okay. Yeah. So that's so awesome that like the other person in the room, you ended up having, enough, I don't know, synergy or trust that you could work well together where she's really a huge part of your operation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So rewind, you were feeling like you could to expand your photography business, hire other photographers, kind of have that moment of dialing up your management. And later on you did expand beyond you. So how was that moment different?
Okay, do you have another half an hour? I actually had severe panic attacks in 2019 because there was so much being asked of me that every time somebody needed something from me, I actually didn't have the time or space to finish anything. And so I developed a fear of starting anything. And it became severely debilitating. I couldn't function. I couldn't do anything like in my daily life. And that was when I needed to bring on an operations person. And so happened to meet my head of operations just in life. I wasn't even trying to network. And I brought him on to potentially get our Amazon up and running. And he's like, why don't I like manage people a little bit? And I was like, okay, that sounds great. Thank you. And then he actually took on the day-to-day logistics of the company. And he thrives as a manager and as a detail person, and we are two halves of one brain. It's really and honestly, the team that's been on board, has stayed since the very beginning. We're the same group,
which is really impressive. Yeah, to have that. What is it now? Since you said 2018, the team?
Well, 2017 is when we like crystallized, and then I would say my operations guy joined in 19.
Yeah.
But I brought an intern on in 2017, and she is the face of our content right now. Oh my God. She was a biomed major and she got her master's in public health, and she's so smart and so funny. And, she's just moved throughout the company in different roles. Like whatever she wants to do, the job changes to meet wherever she is. We're such like a life balance, family oriented company that we shift roles. People's jobs shift dependent on, obviously what the company needs, but what the individual is hoping for as well.
Right. Well, it makes a lot of sense that the way you were able to bring on any team member, that first hire would be operations, because they're doing the very thing that you felt a little daunted by doing.
Well, they weren't the first hire. I had my first hires were a logistics person to help with manufacturing in China. I actually had like a high level business person as like a mentor. She stayed for the first year, and then I kind of brought on more specific people. But so it's a logistics, that kind of like high level business marketing person, and then press. Those three were the first hires, and then the intern, Allie, who's the love of my life.
Well, and so with your, second half of your brain, your operations team member and Allie, what do they have a personal connection to the core problem of painful sex, and that is motivating them, or is it something else?
Everyone on the team, well, I won't say everyone on the team. Most people on the team can relate to the experience in some capacity. Yeah, those who don't have a direct relationship have either worked in reproductive health or pelvic health in some capacity, or who just really, it's important to them to work on impact-driven businesses. Because there's just, it's just impact businesses are self-selecting for the coolest people ever.
So tell me your secrets. How do you sustain a team that wants to stay together and be in it for 5+ years? How does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of day to day. I mean, people need to be cared for, appreciated, positive reinforcement, quick feedback, kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously come with more questions than answers as a person at a higher hierarchy position. Um, benefit of the doubt always. I will say that during our bi-weekly meetings, we have practices that we do. We always start out every meeting with a red, yellow, green. So professionally and personally, you kind of state what color you're feeling. And then if you want to offer an explanation, you can. And that really gives people a jumping off point to know what's happening in our personal lives, if something is going well or something's going wrong. And starting from a place of empathy instead of a place of like, this work thing is not working. We can
Mm-hmm.
just, it's a bit more compassionate. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other way the way that we end our bi-weekly meetings is with thank yous. Everyone goes around and thanks somebody for something that they did within the last 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it sounds kind of cheesy and it is forced. It's like, you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so, I look around at everyone's faces, and even if you're not thanking someone or being thanked, just being immersed in gratitude changes the way that you feel a part of what you're a part of. It
Mm-hmm.
makes everyone feel, it's a really inclusive mindset. It's just so warm, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
word. But it really, it drives motivation, it drives connection between the team, and it really propels what it is that we're doing together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love hearing these concrete examples because anyone who's listening to this can like
Do those.
take this page
Yeah.
out of your book and try it. So agree. Something shifts in people's um, expression or the way they're holding themselves when they receive acknowledgement, let alone be surrounded in a circle of it.
And there's some things that I've learned throughout the process too. It's like when someone's struggling with something, but they make like a little inkling of progress, and then you recognize them for that inkling of progress and identify the character trait that led them there. Then that character trait comes to the forefront, and then they reorient themselves around a new identity. There's this so much, in day to day, so much self doubt or
Mm-hmm.
roadblocks or whatever. But by encouraging positive reinforcement, then
Mm-hmm.
it really gets changes how people work and relate.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you're doing such a great job of like caring for the humans that work for you and just like them as people, kind
The
of.
company is the team.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
it's not anything if the team isn't there. So
Mm-hmm.
uh yeah, I will say I feel very lucky on a day-to-day basis to be where I
So
am.
what role do you feel like you're playing now if you've
Oh my
got your
God.
product?
My job sucks.
Probably roles.
Um I don't know what I am kind of this amorphous thing. I do project based work. I do legal. I do admin. I mean, it's really critical to me to stay in communication with clinicians. So I am spearheading the clinician program. So I'm regular. It's as a CEO, it's critical to keep your feet on the ground and talk to your target audience on a regular basis because you never know what's shifting and changing for them,
Mm-hmm.
what they're going through. So for me, it's people have told me to stop communicating because phone calls take a long time, but it
Mm-hmm.
really gives me a lot of life and
Mm-hmm.
feeds directly back into the company.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me that it sounds like you do a myriad of things, but one of the one you're giving voice to is really like the relational um, empathy, you pathway or connection, not having that sever.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm,
also, it's just keeping up with the language too. It's like I need to know the science behind what it is that we're doing because we don't
right,
just want to sell things. That's not what we do. So we want to
right.
be trustworthy and um, for both patients and clinicians. And so we can't just fake that. We really have
Do
to
you
understand.
think of yourself as like of course the products are sort of the vehicle of reaching people, or I don't know, I think sometimes humans just kind of like having the thing and it is a solution, it's the tool, but really like there's this whole culture and conversation shift around it. Like when you think of your business, do you think of it more of like media, like social impact company, or I don't know, how does
I
it?
think that this is what companies should be in general. It's not, you're not
Mhm.
just, it's kind of like going back to Simon Sinek's Start With Why, or there's a really beautiful, not beautiful, but it was a memo written to the Slack team in, called We Don't Sell Saddles Here. But because basically, if you sell Slack as a communication platform, no one wants to onboard a new communication platform. But if you tell people that you're saving them time and correspondence, you kind of innovation is actually going to change their behavior and their outlook on their existence or contribution to the world. Then that's going
Mm,
to change perception. I actually have the piece up in front of me. There's a quote that I love. It says, "The best, maybe the only real direct measure of innovation is change in human behavior."
mm,
If you come at the problem with a tangible solution, then people, there's people don't want to buy the saddle. They want to buy horseback riding.
mhm, mhm,
So my company is innovating in pelvic health. We're surfacing a conversation that has been buried for way too long. We're contributing to research. We're providing communication tools
mm,
for patients and providers. We are creating not just the physical things that you hold in your hand, but on our Instagram community, you should see the comment threads. There's so much learning that's happening through like social media posts, and it's not like garbage unvalidated information. It's actually based on validated research. And so yes, it's
mhm,
not, we're not just making the things that you hold. We
mhm.
are sparking a paradigm shift with an entirely new category of devices and tools.
Mm. Wow. And you're doing it well. It's been such a joy to, be a witness to your journey. And I remember sitting in a room with you as you were brainstorming different like video ideas for your Kickstarter and
Your
like,
idea won.
you know,
Your
I
idea.
didn't remember that, but
Yeah, yeah. You were
I will
like,
take
everyone was
that.
like, do this crazy Kickstarter video where you put production and you jump out of a car and you bobbity ba, exciting narrative thing. And you're like,
Hmm.
just have people tell their story. I
Hmm.
was like, oh my God, that's the
Hmm.
answer. Just be
I
honest.
I love it. Well, I had no idea. I won't argue that that was what happened, but no, it's been so just I'm so impressed by um, how consistently you've shown up as you and still remained incredibly adaptive to like having a team, to playing a different role, all continue to be in service to solving, uh, to aiding this problem. So
Uplifting.
yes, yes, you are a grand uplifter. If there's a message I will take from today, it's like
Yeah.
you are just such a buoy to others. So
And
thank you
listen, I
for
will, the caveat, there's no caveat, but it's like, it's not always perfect. Sometimes I hate my job. I don't hate it, but like, there's sometimes I feel absolutely worthless. Like, not every day is, you know, direct impact. But I
yes.
will say one thing, another thing that we do, just like a
Mm,
tangible tidbit, is that when people write reviews for our company, we have it, we use Zapier and we zap it into our general Slack channel. So our
mm,
whole team sees every review that comes in. And so we're
oh,
just like
cool.
on a regular basis reminded why we're doing what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It sounds like between these automations and the systems to the practices in your meetings, you allow these rituals and the repetition to help like buoy the spirit, like keep everybody tethered to the why. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really smart.
Yeah. This is fun.
So fun. This is a joy. So we touched on this briefly in the episode, but I want to underline it because I think it's really important for anyone who's thinking about starting a business or to kind of um, grow, or for anyone who's trying to start a business or really develop their offering so that it's more potent. I admittedly came to Emily probably a year or so ago, and I had an idea for a project. And I told her about it, and I was all excited. And I was like, oh, and it's going to be great because this. And she's like, but in the kindest of ways, she said, "So what problem are you solving?" And I had a hard time answering her because in some ways my answer was actually kind of solving my own problem of like, oh, I'm excited to have this opportunity to collaborate with other people, and I think this would be fun to make. And it was a bit more probably about me. It wasn't clear to her what problem I was solving. And I think she brings that sort of rigor to asking like, what is the fundamental problem that you're solving and who is that person that you're solving it for, which I think are these kind of basic, fundamental, essential questions for designing products and services that people really want and will pay for. So I asked her in the interview at one point, like, do you need to have experienced personally a pain point in order to create some sort of powerful offering from it? And I think her answer was sort of like, you don't have to have experience personally, but you really need to talk to those people who have, because so much about this is about developing understanding and building that empathy and then being able to design from that place of like, what does this person truly need? What are they going to be feeling? And then how do I talk to them in their language so that it really resonates? So if you have a business or you're thinking of running one, I would just remind you to heed Emily's uh, perspective here, which is like always thinking about what are you solving for? What's at the heart of it? What's the main pain point, and who is that target or like ideal client for you? Really do your research and find a good fit there before you start building. All right. Thanks for listening in today and hope to be with you soon.